Hey, everybody. Doug here with Hope 360. And we have another testimony that we're filming here. I have Lauren Dillon here with me tonight. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi.
So we're reconnecting with Lauren. She shared her story with us, and we had it up on our website at Hope 360 probably 5 years ago. And we just wanted to reconnect with her because we were just talking before we hit record. Everybody's testimony kind of evolves. Things happen in people's lives, um, God just proves His faithfulness as He's there
Mhm.
through our just ups, downs, and trials, in our life. And so, Lauren, why don't you just share with us? You can kind of go back and share some of the story that you shared before, and kind of what you've been through, and maybe just how you came to know Christ and how God was there for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me back too. So,
Yeah.
you know, uh, like you said, a testimony is ever changing. And, I grew up in a Christian home and had two wonderful parents. Um, but in my teen years, I decided that I was going to walk away from the Lord and live my life the way I wanted to, which led me into drugs and addiction. And I actually found out I was pregnant in treatment with my son, who is now, he just graduated high school.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so that's, yeah, it's been a
And
great,
what age were you when you were pregnant?
I was 18 years old. Yep. I
Okay.
was a
Okay.
junior in high school.
Okay.
So, yeah. But he's my little lifesaver because I had no plans of wanting to quit until I
Mm,
actually found out that I was pregnant with him. So I feel like that was a point where I changed my trajectory, but I still wasn't living for the Lord at that time. I was still going out and partying. I just wasn't doing drugs, or, I wasn't going to church. I had moved in with a boyfriend, and um, but God had slowly he's always been there. He's a gentleman. He's never like going to
mm,
intrude on my life. But I just always knew in the back of my mind that whatever I was doing was wrong, or that he, was disappointing to my parents and whatnot. And so it was 2009. My mom had invited me to church, and in that time, they had done a sermon on abortion, and I had had one a year previous.
mm,
And I just felt so much guilt and shame from that I ended up running down to the altar, and I just like surrendered my life to the Lord. And I literally felt this surge of heat run through my body. And I felt like chains were breaking off of my shoulders. Um, and
wow.
in that moment, I actually decided to move back home with my mom and dad, which I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and just kind of turned my life around. I quit drinking. The people that I would party with kind of were like, why don't you want to do this anymore?
Mm,
And so
mhm,
that was a really lonely time in my life because I, switched friend groups. I was trying to be a mom. Um, and up until that point, I wasn't a very good one. I owe a lot to my parents those first few years, really helping me raise my
mm,
son.
mm,
Um, but just because I turned my life around didn't mean that hardships didn't follow. I ended up
sure.
getting diagnosed with a very rare gastrointestinal disorder. They don't really know if it was from my past drug use or what had caused it, but I was in and out of Mayo Clinic with feeding tubes, um, really just on my deathbed. And there was a point where I actually was like ready to die. I had come to terms with it because they just couldn't
Wow.
figure everything out.
And what
So
age was this?
this was at like 22, 23.
Okay.
Yep. Um, and I remember God telling me, like, no, this isn't your time. But I was
Mm,
so sick and tired of fighting. I had lost so much weight because essentially this disorder, um, your superior mesenteric artery clamps down on the first part of your intestine. So every time I ate, I would have immense pain, and then I would, vomit because nothing would be going down. So it would just fill up in my stomach.
mm,
And so they finally did like a bypass surgery, which was, I was in the hospital for like 3 weeks. Um, and so just during that time, a lot of Christians, my family's friends, just really surrounded me with prayer and love, and really showed me what church community was like. So that, I was able to get better over time, but I still had like these episodes, I called them, which would land me back in the hospital every couple months or whatnot, but it was never as bad as it used to
Yeah.
was.
When it was bad and you felt like maybe you were going to die, were you scared, or were you kind of like at peace with actually dying, or were you, um, I know people now that I get older that, like parents and grandparents and so forth, where we know they're dying, and I know they're confessing and, making sure that they're gonna make it in. You know what I mean? Were you kind of like
Yeah.
that, or what was going through your mind, I guess?
I think the scariest part was that I wasn't scared. I knew where I was
Mm,
going to go. I had such confidence that, you know, Jesus was going to take me, and I had turned my life around and I was serving him. And um, the hardest part was me thinking I wasn't going to be there for my son. Um,
mm, yeah.
but just knowing that when I, felt like God said, this isn't your time, I was like, okay, I
Mm,
guess, and I felt like he gave me the strength to continue fighting, because it was a fight for my life, at that
mm,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so then fast forward,
Yes.
you, I think recently, correct me if I'm wrong, you got married,
Yes.
and tell us about that, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
after that.
So after I had gotten sick, really sick, I ended up going back in to church, and got hired as a campus administrator at a church. And that was by far like my favorite job and the best time of my life. I really
Mm,
just dove in there, and it was so great to be around Christian community. And I ended up meeting my husband there. We had both gone on a missions trip to California and worked at the Dream Center there, which
okay.
is a phenomenal place. Like,
Yeah.
they just do such good stuff there.
And
Um,
I'm sure a lot of people there, excuse me,
yeah.
I feel like there's pepper. It was fake. Okay. I'm sure that a lot of people can relate, or you could relate vice versa to a lot of people there, because isn't the Dream Center a lot of people off the street, addicts
Yep.
and so forth? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite part was literally talking, handing out hot dogs and just having conversations with
Mm,
people on the streets, and just telling them that, Jesus loves you and doesn't matter what you've done. And then being able to point them to the local church that they also
yeah.
were in community with. But
Awesome.
so met him there. I mean, we knew each other prior, but kind of came home from that trip and was like, I met my husband. And my parents were like, what? Oh,
Wow.
sorry.
Whoops. That's all right.
Yeah.
It
And
wasn't that big of a
ah,
earthquake when you met him. It's like,
right, right.
right.
And so we wanted to get married quickly after that. But our pastor advised us, you're both really, impulsive. He is also a recovering alcoholic. He's been
Mm,
sober 11 years. So he was like, let's just take a breath. Let's ease your son into this as well. Cause it had always just been him and I, and he saw men kind of come in and out of my life,
mm.
and was extremely protective.
And
So
how old was your son at this point then?
he was 11. He's
Okay.
11 years old at this point. Yep. And those first few months were horrible. He did everything like you could imagine out of a movie to try to break us up. We
Oh,
were in,
really?
yes, we would be in tears at
Mm.
night talking, and like, is this how our lives are always going to be? Um,
You
and
mean
then,
you and your boyfriend in tears? Okay.
yes,
Okay. Yeah.
yes, like he's just horrible. And I kept saying, this isn't like him. He's a really
Yeah.
good kid.
Yeah.
Um, and then actually one day he was talking to my dad and he's like, I think God is making me sick because I'm getting sick because of my hatred towards Matt. My dad kind of was like, well, that's an odd thing to like say. He's like, but I think I'm going to accept him. And so one night he told us, he's like, I'm going to accept Matt. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, why aren't you happy for that? I'm like, well, it's been a really rough road so far. Like, I guess time
Yeah.
will tell if you can actually, if you actually do. And from that moment on, it was a night and day difference. Like,
Wow.
just accepted him, wanted to hang out with him, was joyful. And then we ended up getting married, and which was a beautiful ceremony. But then, and then my son actually asked Matt to be, if he could be his dad, and call him dad
Oh,
and stuff.
wow.
So, I
Wow.
mean, and now they have an amazing, amazing relationship. So life was good, and we wanted more kids to bring into the mix. And so we had two miscarriages and then got pregnant with our daughter, Ada, who is a spunky little girl. She was born at 36 weeks, so she spent some time in the ICU. Pregnancy was really rough on me. I ended up having this thing called cholestasis, which is something that affects my liver and makes it toxic to the baby. So
Okay.
that was like a big deal during that time. And then we got pregnant a second time, and with our son Zebedee. And at 35 weeks, I went in for our weekly checkup, and he didn't have a heartbeat, um,
Mm,
which just was a complete devastation, whirlwind, like mess.
yeah.
I just couldn't believe, that happened, and that was happening to me, and what did I do, and what was wrong. And, there was a lot of,
Because 35 weeks, I'm not doing the math probably
yeah,
quick enough. How far is that? That's how
that's
many
almost
months?
eight, that's almost eight
Oh,
months,
okay.
or
So
about
you're,
eight
wow,
months.
at the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was at the end, and they were going to deliver him at 37 weeks. So
Oh,
I only
wow.
had 2 weeks left.
Mm,
Um, yeah, that was just so shocking. Like, I still, when I think about it, it was kind of just like a blur. So then we had to, you know, plan. I didn't even know like what to do after that. So meeting with the doctors and, you know, what does this look like? So they had us come in. That was on like a Friday, and I was supposed to have my baby shower for him on that Saturday, the next day.
mm, no.
Which, looking back, I think God was, you know, I was happy in the sense that I didn't have to have all this boy baby stuff around. I hadn't had it yet, so
Hmm.
I didn't have to
Hmm.
look at it all the time. But we went in and on to St. Francis and hospital, because it's an amazing hospital. But and we had him C-section, and the nurses and staff there were just absolutely amazing. We were able to be with him for as long as we wanted. There was an organization called um, oh, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. It's an organization that comes in and takes pictures of your baby in black and white. And the woman who actually came to take pictures goes to our church. And so it was
Oh,
just, I
wow.
saw God's hand throughout the whole process and his faithfulness for it. I didn't understand why it happened. And I would lie if I said that thoughts of like, this happened because you had an abortion didn't come through
Hmm.
my mind, because it did. And I had to be like, nope, that's not how God works. He doesn't like punish you because you did this. Um,
Yeah.
and so I had to trust that he was going to work all things together, whether or not I could see it now or later, if I ever did.
Hmm.
Um, and our church family really really just surrounded us. I literally felt lifted with prayer. Um, and then we had his funeral and we got to say goodbye. But then we got pregnant a third time with our little sweet Odelia. But obviously, going from a pregnancy where you thought you were going to bring your baby home and then you get pregnant again, it was like constant fear, anxiety, and I had to continuously fight that.
Yeah.
But I remember laying in bed and God told me that my daughter she was going to be okay. And so I really held on to that promise early on. And so every time I had those thoughts or the fear come in, I was like, no, God told me that she was going to be okay. So I have to trust that. But I ended up getting the same cholestasis liver thing, COVID. I was in the ICU right before I had her, and then had her, and then couldn't see her for a week because I had COVID, which was a whole nother ordeal.
Right.
But so, it has been a journey, but through everything, I've really seen God's faithfulness. And even with my son Landon and his love for the Lord, the greatest joy I can say as a parent is watching your child love the Lord. And he
Right.
has brought so many.
Oops.
Um,
Oh, there you go. I couldn't hear you there for
just
2 seconds.
oh,
You said he
sorry,
has brought so much.
yeah,
You were talking about, is it Landon? Yeah.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
his
You
name's Landon.
said
Yeah,
he
he's
brought so
brought,
much joy.
yeah, and just he's his love for Jesus just shines, and he brings and invites people to church, and leads like a men's purity group with his peers, and is now
Wow.
going to Germany for 6 months to like a Bible school. So,
Oh my
you
goodness.
know,
Wow.
God's hand has been on him and us, our entire lives. And it's been
Yeah.
so fun to watch and look back and see like what he's done for us.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that I'm having a hard time holding it together here.
Yeah.
It's quite a story. Um, yeah, thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah.
Your faith, I gotta tell you, is just huge. I mean, I I can tell you, yeah, you've been through a lot and ups and downs, and um, if someone were to ask you how did you keep it together, is there a verse or during those moments of, I don't want to say spiritual dryness, but maybe doubt or ups and downs, what would you say to them? Like,
Well, it probably would be Romans 8:28. God works all things together according to those who love him and
mm,
for his purpose. And so I knew no matter what was going on that there would be good, some good would come from it. So I don't believe, bad things happen to us so that we can um, relate to people, or so that we can, I don't think, I don't believe that God works that way. I
mhm,
think
mhm.
life, is full of choices and things happen that we'll never know why, but it's how we can use those experiences to help others. And I love the fact that I get to actually go to prisons now, which that's probably a newer thing too, is I get to go to the women's prison and teach a class there, and we
Oh
get to
wow.
talk about, our life choices and things that, you know, we can grow from. And so being able to have a wide variety of topics that I can unfortunately relate to. The only thing I
Right.
probably can't is that I've never been to prison. Um, but I'm able to have conversations and connect with other women that
Mm,
maybe others couldn't as easily. So,
right. That's
and
huge. Yeah.
yeah,
What's that like to? I went with somebody in the prison ministry once, and I just went along with them, and yeah, you had to get clearance and all this, and he was
yeah,
preaching, and I was the greeter, and boy, that had an impact on me. I remember just sitting there or standing there and just watching these guys. It was
Yeah.
men coming in and just looking in their eyes. I'm thinking, well, what'd he do and how long is he here? What's this guy thinking? You know? And
Hmm.
anyway, what's that like? Are they pretty receptive? Are they desperate to hear about Jesus and the Bible, or what have you experienced?
Yeah, I feel we can get both. We can get people very interested. It's a very slow immerse into the faith, I would say. You know, we talk a lot about what's your legacy? What do you want to leave? Because it's not going
Mm,
to be what you did, because you're not, you know, um, it doesn't define you. Whatever you did doesn't define you. God defines you. So what is
yeah.
your what do you want your legacy to be? You know, what do you want others to remember about you? Or hope. What is hope like?
Hmm.
What does it look like to have hope in these situations, or you know, trust issues or whatever?
Yeah.
One thing I found is the women are very eager to want to talk, but in that setting, it can be a little difficult uh, to open up, and because sometimes they don't want to talk about their family with other, you know, ladies there. But I think they just want to be heard too, you know.
Mm,
I'm not
yeah.
there to like fix their problems or give them advice. I'm there to just listen, you know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What a great ministry.
It really is.
Um, the other thing I was going to ask you was talk about legacy. That was one of my questions. What what legacy would you like to leave? Like if you can picture your own funeral, or someone, people sharing, what would you like to hear them say? Or yeah.
Mm. That that's a good one.
Mm,
Um, Probably that I loved well, that I didn't judge people based on their circumstances or their past.
mm,
Um, that I was faithful and I did what I thought God had called me to do, and that I was a good mom and I showed my kids what it is to love Jesus and to love others and to treat them well.
yeah, that's
Probably.
huge. Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask you was, and that's good. I love that. The other thing I was going to ask you was, in your closest time with God, like, and maybe it's now, or maybe it was, a certain time a while back, or what did that look like? Like, were you desperate for him? How was he there?
Mm-hmm.
How did you hear from him? Was it through the Bible, or quiet time, or music, or just kind of curious as to what that might look like?
Yeah. Um, you know, I think a lot of people could probably say that they feel closest, unfortunately, when they're desperate, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to reach out and feel that closeness when things are going bad, you know, or
Hmm.
not how you want them. Because it takes work, right, to have a relationship with the Lord. You know, you have to read your Bible, and you know, it's not just He doesn't want to just talk to you when things are going well. You need to have a communicative relationship. So I would say the closest I ever felt was probably with the death of Zeb. I felt God's love for me. Um, like I felt him, he wept when I wept, right? Like I felt that he knew exactly how I felt because he watched his son die on the cross. So,
Hmm.
um, I felt like I could be raw with him and that I could open up to him and tell him, sorry, I'm getting emotional, but
Yeah,
you know,
sorry.
exactly like my anger, my disappointment, my pain, and that he could take it from me and that he could also understand exactly how I felt. So I would say that's probably the closest time that I felt, you know, God's
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I know this might have been parts of this might have been difficult, but I think on the
Yeah.
other side of the coin, I think you're more than willing to share, obviously, because you're excited
Yeah.
about your relationship, with God.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of people will be blessed by hearing this. And again, I just want to thank you for coming on here and being vulnerable and just sharing everything you shared. And is there anything you want to, anything else you want to say, or anything we missed before we conclude?
Not that I can think of, but
Okay. Okay.
just that, you're not alone in your struggle or whatever you're dealing with. You're not the only one, and that
Right.
God loves you. And yeah, reach
Yeah.
out.
That is huge, because a lot of on our website at hope360.org, people will email or call in, and that's usually the number one thing is, I feel all alone. Has anyone else gone through this? And that's why feel like these testimonies, these stories are huge, because when they can feel like they can relate to somebody, there's just a bond there and a connection, and that could lead them to Jesus. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again for sharing, and everybody watching. If you would share this with people that you feel like could relate to, and subscribe, and comment, do whatever on any social media platform you're on, because it just helps the algorithm get the video out there. So we appreciate
Yeah.
that. And Lauren, thanks
Wonderful.
again
Thank you
for
so much for
coming on.
having me.
You're
Absolutely.
welcome. Yeah, it was an honor. Yeah. All right. Bless
All
you.
right. Yeah. Bye.